Okay, now on this day when we pay homage to Le Corbusier, we'll continue with the second presentation, which I called maybe rather controversially Le Corbusier between the raven and the shell. And the reason I mentioned the raven and the shell is because I try to describe first for myself the word Corbusier. From what I read, he took this name because this was not his name at birth, from an uncle from his mother's side. But I saw more in it. Maybe I projected too much symbolism into the name. Somehow I saw, because Corb in Romanian means raven, and Uzie, I felt that it's close to obuz, and obuz means shell. It's a shell, and somehow I felt that Corbusier could be placed in linguistically between the raven and the shell, but not translated into English. Maybe I was totally wrong, but that's what inspired me to. And the raven was present actually in his own artwork, like in this one. You know, he designed it. He drew it. You know, the raven is right here. It's not totally black, but that's the bird. And he made this drawing. And here is the real raven, and there is a great poem by Edgar Allan Poe called The Raven, which I suggest to everyone to read it, including to myself, to read it. So the raven, and this is the shell. Now, in what way the shell and the raven meet in order to generate Corbusier, the name Corbusier, this is, of course, very debatable, but it crossed my mind. I don't know what this is. I don't know why I included this picture in this presentation, nor do I know why I show this picture, nor this one. I was preoccupied with certain things relating to weaving in architecture. This is the letter that Le Corbusier wrote to a group of modern architects in Johannesburg, in South Africa, in 1936. And from this letter, I read the three fragments that I presented earlier, where he advocates with intensity the cause of an architect who is very, very thirsty of knowledge, and an ardent art lover, and certainly not a specialist, but someone who is animated by an architecture that is not a profession, but a state of mind. And yes, he ends this letter, and you can see it yourself, with drastic words: to banish stupidity. He certainly suffered a lot in his life, and he even said it, that you know, in order to assert your own creative world, you need a lot of nerve. You need nerves of steel. This is a picture which apparently is not related to Le Corbusier, or is related polemically, because Le Corbusier actually, at least when he was younger, he advocated the willful straight line. We know he wrote a poem dedicated to the right angle, but that is an alchemical poem. But he was against the zigzagging of the donkey. And somehow I like this picture of this, you know, natural manifestation of well, not literally zigzagging, but it's this entanglement, natural entanglement, which maybe Le Corbusier would have dismissed in the name of human willfulness. Although I think, being a very complex man, and actually, surprisingly, I read rather recently, in the end of his life, he actually planned a monument dedicated to the donkey. So he was a man born under the sign of Libra, balance. But the truth of the matter is, those in this under this zodiacal sign are not very balanced. They search for balance, but they are actually imbalanced. And I think he was too. I included this picture from Holbein with this, anamorphosis, because in a way it's the accident of distortion that conflictually animates a context, in this case pictorial, visual, and thus generates, I think, life itself. But it's the same thing happening in the church of Saint Pierre de Firminy Vert, which was built after he died, but based on his drawings and project, where you see the openings, that create a constellation which is not governed by will, and it actually moves the more the sun moves apparently on the sky. So he welcomed, if not this, but he welcomed accidental or aleatory, configurations, if we are to call them configurations. Here he is. I mean, how many architects have pictures taken of them in this way? Not many, I think. Not many work in this way, certainly not any longer. This is another page. He drew incessantly. I read somewhere that he actually drew many of the preliminary sketches for buildings after the buildings were built. I don't know if it's true. This might have been his professor when he was a high school student, whom he admired very much and from whom he received a lot of encouragement. And I think we all need encouragements, doesn't matter the age. But to be young and to have no mentors is probably almost fatal. But he had, and he was lucky, and he was appreciative. He didn't go to college. He didn't have to go to college, but he had a great teacher and mentor, a wise man and a generous man in high school. This is a drawing that I think is emblematic for Le Corbusier, because it shows the marriage between Apollo and Dionysus. Well, maybe Apollo is not so apollonically represented, but it's still, the sun. And while the figure on the left could very well be associated with the moon. So you have lightness and darkness. This is the man of the Libra zodiacal sign, who tries to unite the opposites, and it's a chance to achieve complexity. But it's also a struggle, and I think Le Corbusier had a very intense duality, and it can be seen in almost anything he did. But I don't know why I show the golden ratio here. I don't know. Here he is with Charlotte Perriand. We saw this picture before. A brilliant young architect and designer, whom initially he rejected to be employed by him. Here she is again, who became an accomplished designer and architect, Charlotte Perriand. I don't know why I introduced this picture in this presentation about Le Corbusier. It's actually from a movie by Ingmar Bergman, The Seventh Seal. I don't know. At the time when I made this presentation, when I prepared the PowerPoint presentation, I might have had a reason why I included it, but now I forgot it. This is a drawing by Le Corbusier. well, maybe it's some kind of an engraving. Here he is again with Charlotte Perrier on the left, and on the right his cousin, Pierre Jeanneret, with whom he worked closely and in very good terms for many years. And as I said, they distanced themselves from each other because of different political views during the Second World War. And, you know, beyond the fact that, yes, I have a lot of interest and affection for Le Corbusier, in that case, I'm on the side of Pierre Jeanneret. I think his cousin knew better. His cousin didn't want to have anything to do with the Vichy government and with, you know, Mussolini and Hitler. These are the pages from Le Poème de l'Angle Droit, which is a mystical graphic poem, if we are to call it a poem. It deserves study. Apparently, in the later years of his life, Le Corbusier was very interested in alchemy. And this is surprising. It was surprising for me. And apparently, Le Poème de l'Angle Droit, and there aren't many, too many right angles here, besides the, you know, the format of the pages on which they are printed, these graphic works. This work, yes, deserves attention, and I intend to study it myself more. But there is a page, and unfortunately I don't see it here. And maybe he had different, had some alternatives, because there is a drawing that he prepared for this work that I do not see here, which was, maybe it was abandoned because you know, he indulged in a rather funny but also vulgar attack on Vignola, where he says Vignola est foutu, because he was advocating the cause of the Sun House, or the house, you know, brought to life by the sun, and the sun, the giver of light. But he also had on that page, you know, a voluptuous woman, the body of a woman. So there was the woman, there was the sun, and then there were the irreverentious words against Vignola. Here is, well, here we do see the right angle, don't we? You see Cardon de Cumanus. We see the man as a warrior, you know, the man who traces his path in the world in opposition to the stupid, he thought earlier, the stupid donkey who only zigzags and avoids the big stones and so on, as opposed to the architect, as opposed to the human being who knows what he wants and goes after it in, you know, on a straight road. But things are not so simple, actually. And as I said, Le Corbusier later in life reconsidered his relationship with the donkey, and I read that he was planning in India to erect a monument to the donkey, the one he made fun of at the beginning of his you know, so-called professional life. Here he is, you know, a student of the world, visiting monuments, making sketches, learning. Le Corbusier, the myth, and he is a myth, and he continues to be a myth. And yes, he made mistakes. Yes, not everything he did was you know, beyond reproach or even inspired. But why are we fascinated with Le Corbusier? I think this is a legitimate question. Why does he continue, you know, more than 60 years after he died? Well, not really, 58 years after he died, we still talk about him, because he was a phenomenon. I mean, so many architects of today of fame were influenced by him. It's enough to mention Tadao Ando, no, who, was in fact, without Le Corbusier, it's very possible that Tadao Ando would have been very different, or we would not have known of Tadao Ando. And not just Tadao Ando. Le Corbusier was able to be a catalyst for so many architects, and maybe not only architects. And the question is why? Because his architecture is a difficult architecture. It's not really a pleasing architecture. It's a rather, I could almost say, a tragic architecture. It's not an architecture that pleases easily. No, no, it's a rough architecture. Even Villa Savoy is a villa that is now a museum, and where the people who commissioned it couldn't live in. This manor had also a misanthropic side to him, even maybe a monastic side if we consider Le Cabanon. Who would live, what architect today would live in a room 16 square meters with a very rustic, not to say primitive appearance? Yes, beautifully placed near the Mediterranean Sea. But if you compare buildings by architects and for architects from all over the world, he stands out. That building was for a Robinson Crusoe, was for an iconoclast, for a bohemian, maybe at war with society. And he built it when he had success. He could have built something else. Why did he choose to build a Cabanon? So in some respects, although a lot of ink was used to write about Le Corbusier and print, is still an enigma somehow. And I think this enigma is still provoking us. To me, one thing is for clear. If in life we decide to follow the path of creativity, in this respect, Le Corbusier can be a guide. Creativity requires sacrifice, requires being true to yourself, to your intuitions, to your instincts. Not that he didn't lie. Sometimes he lied. Sometimes he doctored photographs that he published in the books he published because something was inconvenient in those pictures. He was human, like us. But from another point of view, he was different in the sense that he refused to be what he was not. So in a certain way, he was like the founder of the group Nirvana, who said, "I prefer to be hated for who I am than to be loved for who I am not." He fought with the French Academy all his life. And in the end, the French Academy offered him a chair. He refused it. These are the pages from pages actually, I'm sure he did variations for Le Poème de l'Angle Droit. But there isn't a lot of angle droit here, the right angle. There is much more sinuousness and sensuality, and even visceral and labyrinthical plastic expressions. I like this picture of him. Again, he's playful. He's, of course, the one on the right from the three people. He's the animator somehow in society. He's even the clown. I know he wrote a poem called The Acrobat that B.V. Doshi reproduced, and it's about a man who chooses to be in life different than any other one. You know, that he does things that no one else does. And in a way, this is what Le Corbusier attempted to do what no one else did. And he did. And yes, he encountered adversity because of it, but he followed his path. So for all of us who want to be genuinely ourselves, I think he is an encouragement and a guide, but the guide, and he was more than a guide, he was actually a mentor for B.V. Doshi, the very important Indian architect who received the Pritzker Prize like 2 years ago or so, and who died recently. He was a mentor, you know. So Le Corbusier had this power to inspire even those he initially treated not quite gently. I mentioned Charlotte Perriand, but I also mentioned B.V. Doshi, because there is a picture, and I hope it is in this presentation, and I think it is, where you'll see B.V. Doshi as a young man coming from India to work for Le Corbusier without any training in architecture. And of course, Le Corbusier received him, but without pay. So B.V. Doshi was, you know, not only he got ulcer and he was very seriously ill. Maybe Le Corbusier contributed to his misery by not paying him. But beyond this, Le Corbusier inspired him, inflamed him, in the sense that Einstein tried to evoke in his advice to the teachers, not to pour so-called facts and data in the head of the student, but to lit up the torch, to consider that a student or an apprentice or an employee is a torch. And this is what Le Corbusier did. He lit up the torches. Sometimes it was probably, you know, an ardent procedure, in the sense that there was some pain there too. But all in all, in my opinion, someone like him is necessary to stir us up and to make us wake up, to make us jump from the comfortable sofa and lead a life of unicity. We saw this picture with the elegant young man visiting and learning. Now look at him here with his cousin, Pierre Jeanret. You know, only Mircea Eliade used to carry or, you know, use a pipe like Le Corbusier did. Isn't he funny with that hat on his head? You know, you would expect that kind of hat in the winter or the fall, but not in the summer, you know. Now, I guess he was a funny man, you know, if you could say something like this. Maybe a book could be written, Le Corbusier, a funny man, or the funny man. Anyway, he liked to play. And I keep telling everybody, to be creative, you also have to be playful. I don't know why I show this. Here he is. We saw this picture with his mother and the dog. His table with lots of drawings and sketches and eyeglasses, of course, because I said since the age of 28, he only saw with one eye, I think the left eye. Here he is with some friends. I don't know who they are. Really, for those of us who love art and love culture and love ideas and love creativity, he is an encouragement. That's why I do not tire today to talk about him for 10 hours. I probably could talk for even more hours. We saw this picture with the family and with the little boys, Le Corbusier and his brother. Here he is, you know, Le Voyage d'Orient, Voyage to the East, but the book in English is translated a little bit differently. And it is a very interesting book. If he didn't do anything else besides writing what he wrote in letters back home in Switzerland, and the drawings he made in this trip, he would have deserved a place in the culture of the world, definitely. Just like Vincent van Gogh would have deserved a significant presence in the cultural history of humankind based on his letters, even if he didn't paint anything. I'm talking about Vincent van Gogh. But in the case of Le Corbusier, the nerve, the expressiveness of his sketches in his strip when he was very young, the most 22, and then the comments he made, the dialogue with himself. This man learned by himself what life is, what culture is, what art is, and he did so in a very inspiring way, because I think anyone who wants to live genuinely dedicated to art and to creativity can find in what he did a very convincing support. Here he is with Couturier, an interesting monk who loved abstract art, and he was friends with modern artists like Matisse, and we see him here with Le Corbusier. Apparently, it was Couturier who convinced Le Corbusier to do Ronchamp, and also later to do La Tourette. Because I always ask myself, what is the spirituality? What was the spirituality, the faith of Le Corbusier? And I couldn't find an easy answer. In my opinion, he was almost an atheist. And maybe that's why initially, from what I read, he refused the commission to build and to project, to do the design for Ronchamp. But it was this remarkable man on the left, the monk, who loved art, who convinced Le Corbusier. And this moves me very much, I mean, here you have on the left a man of the church, a man of God, a man of faith, who dedicated his life to, serving God explicitly. And then on the right, we have an unconventional architect, extremely erotical, idiosyncratic, courageously pursuing his path. And then you have the two men together, understanding each other with a bottle of wine, I imagine. And I spent a night myself at La Tourette. You can sleep there, you can rent a little room. And so I know that those monks have wine in the cellars, and they do drink. Anyway, it's not just that they drink. Look, I mean, this picture moves me very much, because we see the meeting between a man of faith, a man of God, a man of the church, and then we see on the right, as I said, the artist, the iconoclastic creator, understanding each other and building a bridge between each other. And I think this is beautiful. And by the way of the faith, or the belief systems even that maybe Le Corbusier entertained, I found a picture. I don't have it here. The only how to say, not proof, the only trace of some kind of a illustrative, I don't know how to say, the only thing that I found relating possibly to the spirituality explicitly formulated of Le Corbusier was a picture I found where it was illustrated, kind of a religious painting placed above the headboard of his bed, but I don't know where that bed was. It didn't look like his apartment in Paris, somewhere. But that painting was an eclectic painting, I think painted by a French painter, and I don't know where I'm going to find again that image. But looking at that image, I arrived at the conclusion that he was not a firm believer. I think he had doubts, and I think he was closer to being an atheist. But this man, who was closer to being an atheist, built Ronchamp, a chapel, built La Tourette, a monastery, built, well, after his death, but based on his drawings, his plans, the church Saint Pierre in Firminy-Vert, and also he built a rather mysterious house of shadows in Chandigarh, which he claimed was built in order to analyze or to study the shadows arrived at because of the movement of the sun on the sky. But I'm not so sure that he told us the whole story about the House of the Shadows. I mean, its very name, the House of the Shadows. And it was built in front of the Parliament building in Chandigarh, of all places. I feel that somehow that carcass of a building, that skin of a building, because that's all there is in concrete, has some metaphysical sense, maybe a little bit ominous. Anyway, here he is in the car. We saw it. Here he is, I don't know where, with Picasso. Maybe at the bottom of l'unité d'habitation, with some admiring students perhaps around them, Picasso and Le Corbusier, both with their shirts unbuttoned, just to show that they are the artists here. I'm a little bit malicious and maybe even a little bit envious. Drawing he did when he was younger. He drew well. He drew very, very, very well. But these are, very early works. Like he was not even 20 when he did them. Why do I show this work by Herzog and de Meuron in China? I'm not sure. Maybe to show what can be built when you do not ignore the zigzagging of the donkey. Here we see, of course, the famous Le Corbusier human silhouette, and then an admirer of Le Corbusier, maybe a student in architecture, mimicking from the feminine side of the world what the masculine side of the world inscribed in the concrete. Again, I don't know why I show this building, which I do like, by Herzog de Meuron in China. Maybe again because of the tortured, I guess, and the zigzagging of the building, which is in contradiction with Cardon Decumanus. And this is also by Herzog and de Meuron in New York City, something that they did at the ground floor of a building, which shows again the reappearance, the re-emergence of the doubting, of the zigzagging, because Le Corbusier accused the donkey that is very without will. And, instead of going through a stone, the donkey avoids the stone. But I think the donkey was wiser than the architect, in my opinion. Anyway, I'm not trying to say that Herzog and de Meuron are wiser. It's just that it's clearly coming back to architecture, not only ornament, and not only zigzagging, but also what I might call architectural embroideries and the entanglements of weaving, even in a so-called irrational way. I've said goodbye to the overworked notion that architecture has to save the world. Now, of course, these words are of Peter Zumthor. But I'm not entirely convinced. I mean, on one hand, yes, demagogically claiming that architecture has to save the world. It's its duty to save the world. Yes, I don't believe in this either. But if you don't believe at all that maybe through your building, you can improve a little bit something in this world, you can at least move one person, one's heart, you can inspire someone through your building. with whatever you build. Unless you have this belief that erecting your building, you do not shame yourself by throwing a shadow on the earth that is undeserved. I don't think you can build, and I don't think you should build. So I think Peter Zumthor's statement is a little bit problematic because it doesn't really leave too much space for that idealism that some architects claim today, like Stephen Hall, that we need badly, because the soul needs the ideal more than the real, as he said, Stephen Hall. So how do we marry, or how do we confront what Stephen Hall said? The soul needs the ideal more than the real, with what Peter Zumthor said. I've said goodbye to the overworked notion that architecture has to save the world. It's perhaps true that it doesn't have to save the world. It's not a should there. But ideally, I think architecture should, no, I shouldn't use the word should. Architecture could entertain the hope that it could contribute at least a little bit to a better world, if I am to pronounce myself in a rather predictable or way. Anyway, another picture. Who are they here? Of course, on the left, the recognizable Le Corbusier. In the middle, his wife. But who is the man on the right? Well, the man on the right is a rather mysterious Romanian architect, Jan Badovic, who was living near the Mediterranean Sea, not far away from where Le Cabanon by Le Corbusier was. They were friends, and Jan Badovic was actually an advocate and promoter of Le Corbusier because he was the editor of an important avant-garde magazine, which published intensely the works of Le Corbusier. So that's the man on the right, Jan Badovic. Here he is with the Prime Minister of India, Nehru, visionary himself, and a blessing for India, in my opinion. Here is André Malraux, the great writer, French writer and Minister of Culture, who saved Villa Savoy, and who also read the eulogy to Le Corbusier when he died. Very important French intellectual and writer. Here he is. We saw this picture with Couturier. This is a book that actually Le Corbusier knew of by another Romanian, Matila Ghica, who wrote a very important book, The Geometry of Art and Life. And I saw this book. I didn't know anything about it when many years ago I was invited to a party in the studio of Stephen Hall in Manhattan, in New York City. And I discovered this book on his shelf. I didn't know anything about Matila Ghica, but the name sounded kind of familiar, although it was written with Y and K. And indeed, he was a Romanian diplomat, very interested in this topic, geometry and art and life, or geometry and life and art. This is that page that he prepared for the Le Poème de l'Angle Droit, which was perhaps not published in the end, where he says, j'apprête sous ce titre La maison au fil du soleil et Vignol enfin est foutu. Merci, Victoire. I mean, for Romanians, I don't have to translate the word foutu. It's very similar to the Romanian word, a very non-academic word. So, Le Corbusier was this sometimes or often this irresponsible child was spontaneous, was irreverentious, was charged erotically continuously, and the drawing shows it. And he had what he had against Vignola. I mean, he hated Vignola with a passion, as someone would say. He even said, Brisel as I call, même même, Brisel as I call, l'école Vignola in as much as l'école break the school, the Vignola school in as much as the school Le Corbusier. He continuously had a polemic with Vignola, and in this case, a hilarious one. Anyway, moving forward to a few more illustrations in this presentation. Here he is. I don't know where he is. I think he's in Russia here, in former Soviet Union. He almost looks Russian or a Soviet here in this picture. Here he is with his cousin on a boat with Pierre Jeanret. It's easy to recognize Le Corbusier because of his hat, mainly. Here he is. We saw a fragment of this picture with Charlotte Perriand on his right, and then on his left, Pierre Jeanret, and I don't know who the other men are. Here he is with his emblematic Zarathustrian man. He is in Russia. I mean, he's in former Soviet Union. I don't know who the lady is. Le Corbusier Le Grand. There was actually a grand book published a few years ago called Le Corbusier Le Grand, which has 10 kilograms, and it is quite big. And I have it actually. And I thought that maybe a book could also be written called Le Corbusier Le Petit, because I think he had a small child in him. And I think that small child should be inspiring for all of us, because he said at one point something like, the problem in life is not to become young, to remain young, but to become young. And I like to think that he became young, or he became a child. Without that child, we cannot truly create. Again, Malraux, we saw here is it him somehow? I don't know, maybe it's him, but it's a picture which I forgot it exists. And now I come to, I don't know, I mean, I enter now a dangerous field, because I have my own ideas about Athena, you know, the goddess Athena. Or Athens, you know, she sprang from the head of Zeus without a mother, just like Jesus sprang from Marie without a father. So I don't think this is just a coincidence, you know. So this very important goddess in the Greek mythology sprang from the head of Zeus, already armed and without a mother. She was created by the head, by the mind of Zeus. Here she is again. Why do I mention Athena in this presentation about Le Corbusier? I'm not very sure. I have to remember, because as I said, I prepared this presentation some years ago, and I'm sure I had a point. Maybe in the following instances, I will remember what I wanted to say with it. But as you can see, I dwell on it, that indeed Athena sprang from the head of Zeus, already armed, to defend even his infidelities. I don't know. I don't know why I included her in this presentation, and rather, you know, in an abundant way. But here, well, I guess because this is a preoccupation I had at that time, and I still do, about weaving in architecture, and I relate weaving to the zigzagging of the donkey. So in this, I am situating myself rather polemically vis-à-vis Le Corbusier, at least in his younger years. In this engraving, we see Dante visiting the Inferno, the hell, and we see Ariadna transformed into a spider, continuously weaving. Of course, that's what spiders do, by Athena, because Ariadna, who was a mortal, won the competition in weaving in competition with Athena. So Athena punished her by transforming her into a spider. Why? What does the spider have to do, or Ariadna, with Le Corbusier? Well, it does, I think, because I think Le Corbusier was not quite capable of weaving. Only later in life he wanted to dedicate a monument to the donkey, which he thought was zigzagging. And between weaving and zigzagging, I think there is some kind of a relationship. He's assuming the labyrinth, and he was not a stranger to the labyrinth, actually, Le Corbusier, despite his, explicit liking of the cardon decumanus and of the straight line and of the right degrees angle. Enough with the pictures about weaving. Here we see Athena and Ariadna competing. I think I'm beginning to remember why I included this strange intermezzo here. This page is from it illustrates the thought on the beginning of architecture of Abbé Laugier, a Frenchman, a monk who thought that first came structure. So the first building came into being based first on structure. So this page illustrated his book on this. And yes, we have the structure built with the trunks of trees and the beam and the woodwork for the roof. But there is another conception of Gottfried Semper based on, in a way, on weaving, and he claimed that actually it wasn't the structure that was the first architectural gesture, but it was actually the weaving of vegetal material like leaves and branches of bushes and trees that the primal man, our ancestors, were able to obtain from around themselves when they try to protect fire. So again, there are two conceptions. One is the almost rationalistic one that claims that structure comes first and was advocated by Abbé Laugier, and this picture was taken from the book published by Abbé Laugier. And then the other conception was of Gottfried Semper, who in the 19th century considered that the first architectural gesture might have been actually textile work, weaving, by weaving the branches of bushes, trees, and so on. Because people then didn't have the tools to cut down trees. That came later, after the first people on this earth were able to emancipate themselves and create, build, construct the tools necessary to cut down trees. Anyway, this is a whole, it's a vast subject, and maybe it's not now the time to dwell on it. Here is Le Criminel, the architect as a criminal. I like this picture very much of Le Corbusier. You can tell that this is a man also capable of melancholia and kindness, who suffered, but he was a fighter, and I think we can learn from him not to betray what we feel and think, to be ourselves as much as we can. Doesn't matter what, and we need such encouragements, because otherwise life could be really very depersonalizing and dehumanizing. I don't know why I show Frederick Kiesler now with his endless house. Frederick Kiesler, born in Cernăuți, which was part of Romania or the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time. Here he is Le Corbusier with Walter Gropius. Let us remember, Le Corbusier was able to see only with one eye at this age, since the age of 28, as opposed to the other, man with a bow tie, Walter Gropius, who had two functioning eyes, and it seems even no need of eyeglasses. An early drawing from high school by Le Corbusier, other drawing by Le Corbusier from high school. So these are studies of a high school student, because his formal education stopped then. This is a later drawing, and I'm even a little bit confused. Is it by him? Because instead of the Vitruvian man, we see the Vitruvian woman, don't we? I forgot, but is this by him? I'm confused. Anyway, back to architecture, and he drew well. Yes, he drew well, but there isn't a lot of emotion here. Now, who is here? This is the architect who actually took upon himself the difficult responsibility and the great responsibility to build Saint-Pierre de Firminy-Vert, the church Saint-Pierre in Firminy-Vert by Le Corbusier after Le Corbusier died. And I think he deserves all our appreciation and affection. I find his work, the work, and unfortunately I don't even know his name, and it is unforgivable. I'm ashamed. I don't know his name, but he deserves to be known, and his name deserves to be known, and he has to be acknowledged, because this was a work of love. Imagine, he took the drawings, the project of Le Corbusier, and he transformed them into a building. That's not a little thing. And there was a big communal effort, international effort, to gather money to build this building. Artists sold their artworks to contribute with money to erect the building that Le Corbusier couldn't build while he was alive. And this shows again the immense power of this man. He died, and after his death, a community of artists, politicians, all kinds of people from all walks of life contributed with money to build Saint-Pierre de Firminy-Vert. This is the power of art. So maybe the Latins are not incorrect when they say, or when they said, ars longa, vita brevis. Art is long, life is short. We all die, we are born in order to die, but art has the power to transcend, even to transgress death. And this is what happened here. After the death of Le Corbusier, this building was built. That we make presentations, that we make exhibitions, that we make retrospectives at the Museum of Modern Art, or I don't know where. This man continues to be alive, Le Corbusier. And it hurts me to say it, sometimes much more alive than we are, most of us. So again, let's salute and let's have reverence for this Spanish architect who took upon himself, I think he was Spanish, to build this work by Le Corbusier. And here is Le Corbusier himself. He seems to be in some pictures rather... I'm sorry, please turn off the microphone. Please turn off the microphone. Thank you. I think in some pictures he seems to be frail, Le Corbusier, but not in all of them. Anyway, he was a man who gave himself... Please turn off the microphone, otherwise I stop the presentation, please. Thank you. And here is the goddess who inspired it all, and that is his mother. At 91, Le Corbusier made this drawing in 1957. he was to die 8 years later. So he was, about 70 himself. He made this artwork with his mother, and we see the sun and we see the moon. But we also see there in the proximity of the sun this approximation of the sun in red. Maybe that is the light of passion. But there is also some blood there, so you wonder a little bit. Maybe he implied or inferred some suffering as well. Anyway, the moon seems to be more serene than the sun. We saw that one with Herzog de Moron. This is this window. This particular window was actually broken. A thief entered a Ronchamp. This is a Ronchamp, and broke this window with a drawing of Le Corbusier, and other windows have inscriptions. His dialogue with Marie, the mother of Jesus, but maybe also Marie, his own mother, as some people think. And here we see children, insinuating themselves in the alcoves of his concrete work. And these are the children on top of l'unité d'habitation in Marseille, kindergarten children. I only hope they didn't advance on this sloping plan, surface slab, because you imagine what. But it is a rather nice picture, showing the joie de vivre of children, the transcending rules and regulations. And I love it. I think we should all be like that, with this thirst for expression. I mean, not expression, it sounds terrible, but this involvement with life in a pure and enthusiastic way. And that's what they are good at. And that's why I keep saying to myself too, we should work on the floor. We should do architecture on the floor, like toddlers. Try it, please. You'll see. You'll do a different kind of architecture if you work laying on the floor. Maybe be like a toddler on your knees. Just try to do some work, academic work on the floor, and you'll see it will be more joyous and more playful. Art by Le Corbusier, art by Le Corbusier, art by Le Corbusier, art by Le Corbusier. Not too many right angles here. Well, there is one or two, but there is more sinuousness and sensuality. He loved art. I mean, I don't think there was a great architect ever who didn't love art. It's impossible, because art at its best, architecture at its best becomes art. Again, here he is with his cousin and Charlotte Perriand. I don't know what this. We saw that drawing by him, Project Le Corbusier. This was I don't know. I introduced in this presentation because I made a presentation on the summer solstice, and the student from Bucharest created a solar clock. And this is from his project, I think, a solar clock. Yes, he proposed a solar clock for Piazza Unirii. Here it is, placed in Piazza Unirii. And why did I introduce this project in the presentation about Le Corbusier? Because I think Le Corbusier was a man under the sign of the sun, obsessed by the sun. The sun appears in many of his sketches in its apparent movement on the sky, and he considered the sun very, very seriously. So most surely we should consider the sun very seriously as well. Here it is, Piazza Uniri, and with a solar clock proposed by this student from the School of Architecture in Bucharest. Yeah. Because the dialogue with the elements, the dialogue with the sky, the dialogue with cosmos is very important for architecture. We should never neglect it. And Le Corbusier didn't neglect it. So this was the project by this student. Okay, now why do I show Icarus here, the fall of Icarus? You see here, this is Icarus fallen from the proximity to the sun, because I think it's very important to aspire towards the sun, maybe with the same passion of Ichnatos or Ichnaton, the great Egyptian pharaoh who transformed polytheism into monotheism, and Ra, the sun god, became the unique god. And Icarus was flying later on in Greece towards the son of Daedalus. He was flying towards the sun in a noble aspiration towards the giver of life, the sun. And then, because his wings were made of wax, melted, and you see him in the painting by Bruegel, fallen into the water. Maybe we should all have not wings of wax, but have wings and aspire to approach the sun, but not too much, because if we approach the sun too much, we might end up in the same place where Icarus is in this painting by Peter Bruegel. Now here we see Icarus, and we see the labyrinth, and we see the sun on the right, and the sun again is very present in the work of Le Corbusier. I could almost say he was a solar architect. This is also an artwork showing the fall of Icarus, but a modern work. And I don't know, yes, I think, sorry, this presentation is a little bit chaotic, as I mentioned earlier, and a little bit zigzagging, like the donkey that Le Corbusier hated when he was young. And by the way of the zigzagging of the donkey, I allow myself to even show a small house I designed, which is this one, which I designed without thinking. This is the plan. I mean, it's not really zigzagging, but it has a certain flirtation with danger, because the line is not quite straight. I mean, the line of the movement within the house. I drew it with a pen without thinking. It just came into being. And I also show it because if you look at this building by Le Corbusier, the famous chapel of Ronchamp, do you notice here, I mean, it's impossible not to notice this southern wall, which is so very different from all the other walls. Why did he make this wall a medieval wall? Because it's thick here, perhaps 2-3 meters thick, the wall. And the windows, done in this medieval fashion, so to speak, and all the other walls are different. I have my own theory about this, about Ronchamp, the chapel in Ronchamp, is that this is the south-oriented wall. And I mean, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but I'm tempted to psychoanalyze Le Corbusier here. Le Corbusier accepted the invitation of Couturier to build Ronchamp for Marie, the mother of Jesus. But I think unconsciously, at least, it's possible that Le Corbusier also built this chapel for his own mother, whose name was also Marie or Maria. And this wall, because the son, Le Corbusier, had a sometimes explicit desire towards his mother, if we are to consider a letter which I didn't see, but I read about it on the internet. There is apparently a letter that Le Corbusier wrote to his mother that is unpublishable. He had a lot of desire for his mother to accept him and to love him even. But let's imagine this scenario in psychoanalytical terms. It's some kind of a deeper complex at work here. So this thick wall towards the south, towards where the light of the sun comes, right, is actually a protective wall. It's a shield. This shield, this thick, very thick wall, is protecting Maria or Marie and the chapel from the insinuations, the attack of the sun, the sunlight. If Jesus was the sun, well, Jesus attacks the chapel through the sun rays, and exactly in front of the sun rays, the great architect places a shield, a thick shield, a protective shield, a fortress wall. Now, let's replace Jesus or the sun with Le Corbusier, because I think unconsciously at least, he had a heroic disposition, and it's very possible that rather unconsciously, he saw himself as some kind of Christ in the field of architecture. And in the field of his own biography, as we know, he had this longing for the mother. So if the son, Christ, we place Le Corbusier, and then the lights, the aspiration, the longing, the feelings coming from the son, Le Corbusier, son, S-U-N, from Le Corbusier towards his mother had to be restricted because she was his mother. So then he placed this fortress-like wall to oppose the advancing affection coming from the son towards the mother. I don't know if I explained very well, but it's a very unusual building when you consider two very different walls that he employed in it. And towards the sunlight, he places this massive fortress-like wall, which is pierced in the many windows, colored windows, where he inscribes all kinds of small, phrases, a dialogue with Marie. But which Marie? This is my question. Anyway, I leave it open. I said enough, but I think this work in particular is also charged in autobiographical terms. I think it is more than just a chapel for the mother of Jesus. I think it is also a chapel that it is intermingled with aspects of his own biography, Le Corbusier's biography. And this is another house I was doing at the same time, also with an irritating zigzagging that probably would have irritated Le Corbusier, which I drew with a pen, playing essentially one day, and the top from view from the top. And it's certainly not a building that would correspond to the alignments, the commandments of the willful architect who knows exactly where to go and how to go. That is in a straight line. But as opposed to me, Tadao Ando also likes and liked Cardon de Cumanos. We see the cross, and even in a recent work, a chapel he built in China, I think it's in Japan. He employs the cross very evidently, very obviously. Yes, there is the circle as well, but you see the cross. You see the Cardon de Cumanos, Tadao Ando, the willful architect, perhaps sometimes a little bit too willful. Maybe Tadao Ando could have learned something from the donkey too, if he would have liked to. And this is the tomb stone of Le Corbusier and his wife, Yvonne. They are buried together. And as you can see, he died in 1965 and he was born on the 6th of October, 1887. They are together there near the Mediterranean Sea. And here we see again, I mean, really, this fortress-like world that he did at Rochon, to me, this says a lot about Le Corbusier, not only at a professional level, but at a personal level. Now, recently, Renzo Piano, or not so recently, in later years, Renzo Piano built a building here for tourists, but these were built by Le Corbusier for the monks, for the people. Really, it almost amuses me the self-portrait that I see in this in the plan of this famous work by Le Corbusier. Here it is. You know it, so I don't insist. Now, what is maybe strange and maybe it is not true what I read, but I did find on the web a sketch. Someone drew two circles that intersected, and in the first circle, the one on the left was called a Corbusier. The second circle with the same diameter was called Yanis Xenakis. And in the vesica of their intersection, you know, resulting from the overlapping, it was written Ronchamp. Someone in this world thought that apparently Yanis Xenakis, born in Brăila, influenced Le Corbusier, and it was not a Romanian who had this thought. Had an influence in the office of Le Corbusier because he worked for Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier didn't work in this way before Yanis Xenakis arrived in his office. Now, I'm not entirely convinced that this is the case here. I do know that Yanis Xenakis had a very important role in the creation of the Philips Pavilion at the Brussels or Brussels World Exhibition. But Ronchamp, it's possible, I don't know, it's possible that the other architect with only one functioning eye, and that was Yanis Xenakis, had a certain influence on Le Corbusier. Unfortunately, after 11 years of working together, 11 years, apparently Yanis Xenakis was told to leave the office because there was a conflict between Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis based on what they did together for the pavilion, the Philips Pavilion in Brussels. And I think Yanis Xenakis claimed that his role was more important than the one that was acknowledged. So they arrived at a conflict. This happens all the time, you know, when matters of authorship come into being. And yes, they said hello to each other. Now, if Xenakis truly had some kind of a role in the birth of this building, I don't know. I'm almost tempted to think that he didn't. But there was someone, as I said, on the web who, you know, showed that in the interlocking, the overlapping of the two circles, one Le Corbusier and one Yanis Xenakis, in the middle was the generating place of Ronchamp. Who knows? Ronchamp again with a pierced thick wall on the right. And this is another window in this very, very thick fortress-like wall. And I don't know why I show this. This was from a movement, protest movement on Wall Street in New York. You know, Occupy Wall Street. Maybe I maybe I place this picture in this presentation because I see the conflict, the tension, the war even between aggressivity and gentleness and grace, the denser, the fragile, denser, and then the masculinism of the animal, the robust, violent, aggressive animal, which is the aggressiveness of high capitalism and maybe capitalism in general, competition, profit, production, consumption, profit, and then above we see the graceful human silhouette dancing. I include in this presentation, but I'm not now in the position to go through its intricacies. Although I do say something. I launched the competition, A House for Pink Floyd, and I don't know now why I included this, maybe to show the connection with the elements and even with the sun, with the cosmos. It was a very nice project done by a student from the Faculty of Interior in Bucharest, and I just show you, a philosophical, a geometrical project, a project with cosmic concerns. I included it mainly for the students in architecture here to show that there are dreamers in our school, and then without dreams, Le Corbusier would not have been. So dreams are important. Equally important is the dialogue with cosmos, with the sky, with the sun, with mythology, with Ariadne, with Athena, if you want, with Jesus even. It's important to open up to life as much as possible, as courageously as possible. And this student did a very good work, well, for Pink Floyd, but with cosmic aspirations. I am not going to read this. It is from the project. Maybe I should read it, but we have so much else to see by the way of Le Corbusier. I will leave this matter here. Although I see I show a lot of images with this project. A house, but it's actually a temple for this. And this is another work which also assumes the cosmic elements, also submitted for a house for Pink Floyd, I think. The Dark Side of the Moon, yes. Because Le Corbusier himself honored the sun and the moon on the roof of the parliamentary building in Chandigarh. And it's very possible that in most of his works, he was aware of the day and the night, the sun and the moon. And he has inscribed in some of his drawings the trajectory of the sun during the day and during the night underground. And so this creates the 24 hours cosmic cycle. But this is a project by a student who sent her work for the House for Pink Floyd. I don't know what this is. I'm glad I arrived at this picture. So this most frail person here in the center is B.V. Doshi, one of the recent laureates of the Pritzker Prize. He died recently at 93 or 94, a very important architect who never studied architecture in a school, but founded a school of architecture in Ahmedabad. A very generous, talented, and inspiring man. B.V. Doshi, whom unfortunately the master Le Corbusier didn't pay, at least in his first years working for Le Corbusier, because I remember reading that Doshi flew from India to London to attend a conference by Le Corbusier. He was studying actually art, not architecture. Then he asked Le Corbusier to hire him, and Le Corbusier agreed to hire him, but without paying him. So considering how Doshi looks in this picture, it's very possible he didn't eat too much. Then on the left, we see none other than Yanis Xenakis, an engineer, himself only with one functioning eye. So these two men in the foreground together had only two eyes. Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis. This engineer, who never studied architecture, became himself a good architect and a very trusted member of the team of Le Corbusier's office. And he also became one of the most important composers of avant-garde music in the world. Yanis Xenakis, truly a great creative force who transcended suffering, and he even transcended being placed on a blacklist of the Greek government, being condemned to death because he fought on the wrong side politically. He was a resistance fighter, and yes, he was placed on a death list, Yanis Xenakis, and then he escaped Greece, went to France, and here he was in the office of Le Corbusier. A very moving picture, because these people, you know, Xenakis, Doshi, Le Corbusier, and the others, unfortunately, whose names I do not know, made us talk about them today, one day after his birth. And this is the power of art. And this is the power of good architecture. And this is the power of creation, of creativity, to transcend time. Indeed, ars longa. So let's not forget this picture. I don't know what I showed there. Yes, talking about fragmentation, but again, this might not have much relation except with that southern wall of Ronchamp. It's the Fritz Botruba Church in Vienna, called the brutalist work. Another brilliant work, a sculptural work destined for serving what we call the sacred in a very different way from Le Corbusier. I thought of showing this work, although maybe today was not really important to show it, but since it is in this presentation, let's quickly show it. It was built by a sculptor, again, not an architect, and it bears its name. It's the Fritz Botruba Church. He was a sculptor, not an architect. I stop here because I think I went a little bit too far in my presentation. I mean, far away from Le Corbusier. Let's talk a little bit if you want.